We're returning now to the Great Mosque in Isfahan. I need to make a figure number correction. It's figure 220 in O'Reilly that actually is the Iwan that is associated with the entranceway to the prayer hall, and that is referred to as the Qibla Iwan that we're taking a look at. I have from Smart History the diagram that's located on our right. You probably saw this in your reading, and it is the 4E1 plan. This is the courtyard, and these are the E1s. This is the entrance portal. This is the Qibla E1. And behind that, you can see the essentially the footprint for the dome and for the covered prayer hall. It is the most important of the 4E1s. The 4E1 plan, which originates in Iran and spreads out to the rest of the Muslim world, is, as you can obviously see, pretty symmetrical, so it has a formal quality associated with it. Usually there is in the courtyard water, but the 4E1s themselves do surround the Shan or the courtyard. There is, I think, also a parallel in the design of the 4E1 mosque with some of the garden design that is so important coming out of Iran. And that would be the symmetry. In particular, and the use of often a central element of water. This is 219 in Mr. O'Reilly, and this is the portal E1. So what you can see is that the E1s, the 4E1s do not necessarily have to match, but they do have to create a harmonious whole around the courtyard. And that is true for the Great Mosque in Isfahan. It's successful in terms of its harmony, its sense of calm, the way in which blue pervades the tile work in particular. This is a view of the interior and of the dome also. That's a part of the prayer hall, incorporating again a great deal of blue, so it's soothing, it's relaxing, but it's also absolutely filled with abstract decorative pattern so that there are no references to humans, animals, or perhaps it's best to say no narrative content which would distract us from prayer. There is a great delicacy that is involved in the overall design that is incorporated on the walls and ceiling. And I think it might, in fact, remind you a little bit of what Iranian carpets look like, with every inch of the surface being filled with very delicate, almost ethereal pattern that floats across the walls. At the same time, there are clear borders and internal elements are often kept in compartments. We do have floral references, so you could say also that we have arabesques that play an important role in the design. This is a closer look at the dome, which again is in blue, the favored color of the Safavids in terms of tile work on architecture. I would also like you to see that just as it was on the inside decoration, we have a strip that incorporates and includes calligraphy into the overall design of the monument. Let me finish the structure with a closer look at some of the tile mosaic work that comprises the Muqarnas decoration that is found in the interior design of the E1. And this is the E1 that is the Qibla E1. It is mosaic tile. Not everything in the building is mosaic tile, but the most important elements of the building are made with mosaic tile. What's mosaic tile? Well, it's tile work that is actually created out of cut pieces of ceramic to create a pattern. So it is a form of mosaics, but it's mosaics that actually are made specifically from pieces that have been fired in the kiln as a part of ceramic coloring. That means that each of the little parts of the flowers that we're looking at in this are separate pieces of tile that have been cut and laid into a mosaic pattern. So we're talking about amazing workmanship, particularly over the surfaces of the muqarnas decoration, which are curved. This is the best I could do to blow this up. I'm talking about is, for example, this being a piece of mosaics, this being a piece of mosaics, this being a separate piece of mosaic that has been cut from tile and put together to create a pretty elaborate and imposing, impressive pattern. This is an example of a tile mosaic, which you can actually see. We have panels both in the University Museum, University of Pennsylvania, and also in the Philadelphia Museum of Art. So either one of these museums usually is in the process of displaying these Sufi panels. They came from a Sufi institution in Isfahan from the 16th century. So basically what I'm saying is here's some tile work that comes from Isfahan around the same time as the tile work we just looked at from the Great Mosque. The Sufi are a group of Muslims. You could be Sufi and be Shia, or Sufi and you could be Sunni. It is a kind of overlay that can apply to anybody who is Muslim who seeks a direct and personal connection with God. So it is, if you are Sufi, you are seeking a very emotional and loving connection with God, with the divine. Many Sufi groups engage in poetry, in music, and even in, as you may have heard, whirling in order to alter their state of awareness so that they can feel this very strong connection with the divine. And these panels came from a Sufi institution. In the center, you can see one of the medallions, like the medallion in the carpet that we looked at from Iran. And you can also, I think that's an 8-pointed star in the very, very center of it. So you can find, again, at the root, at the core, geometry. Well, all of the elements of design here are created with cut pieces of tile that have been put together into a mosaic form. From a distance, you can see the bigger chunks that have been inserted to create the, as we have seen, typical Safavid blue background. On the two side panels of this, you have two plants in jars. This is the jar and this is the plant or the palmate, but it may indeed represent a tree of life, suggesting that through Allah, through Islam, it is possible to engage in eternal life. And the blue color here, I'm pretty certain, is a direct reference to water and to the waters of paradise. Should you make it to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, you can actually see a mihrab, which has been removed from a madrasa in Isfahan. A madrasa is a religious school, and this also is a work that was created from about the same time period, perhaps a little bit earlier. But it shows you this is tile mosaic. So this is something you can indeed get very close to in the Met and take a look at the incredible detail, the tiny little pieces that have been cut and then put together in a mosaic pattern. This is also, I'm going to say, an interesting mihrab because the decoration and much of it is again a little bit like a carpet. Every inch is covered in a floral pattern. In particular, I'm thinking about this section up here with interconnecting lines and suggestions of flowers. But at the same time, we have script calligraphy because it is beautiful writing. It is Surah 14 that goes all the way around the edge. And then we have, and this is in a script form, Kufic, that we have seen before. This represents the sayings of the prophet, and that would be the hadith. So a portion, not all will fit here, but it would be a portion of the sayings of the prophet coming from hadith. And then in the very, very center, right in here, is a panel, and that panel reads, the prophet, blessings be upon him, said, it is, by the way, this is an aside, it is customary when you say the name of the prophet to follow it with blessings be upon him, and that's an act of respect. So the prophet, blessings be upon him, said, quote, the mosque is the abode of every believer. I wanted to point that out because I want to stress the fact that the mosque is a fundamental element of Muslim practice. It is a place where you can go, a kind of refuge from the secular world. It is a place where you can go to pray. It is a place where you can go to be with your fellow members of the community. And it is a place where you can go to be close to Allah. It is also important because, again, prayer, the second pillar of the faith, is so fundamental within Islam. And we do need to remember that we do get called to prayer 5 times a day. One of the best places to pray is in a mosque. I'd also like you just to look at, I'm going to call it playful, at the patterning in this portion, the very tip of the arch of the mihrab. And if you take a look at the geometric shapes and plans in the background, I think you can see that they are imitating Muqarnas. This is flat, but it is an imitation of Muqarnas decoration. I'd also like to suggest that the way in which the Muslim artist who created this has used writing or calligraphy, he has applied it in something also, I think, of a playful way, certainly a creative way. We already recognize the Kufic, which is that angular and very, I'm going to call it a rigid style of creating the written word, extending out originally from stone carving, which of course would have I'm going to say required you to create forms that were angular and a little bit straight. That's in stark contrast to the writing style that you see over here, which is another style of calligraphy. This is referred to as thuluth. Thuluth. I'm not asking you to know that name, but I'd like you to see it is a style that is by its nature curving and flowing. And in this style, about a third of each letter tends to be sloped. If you take that and the kufits together, they tend to balance, harmonize, and complement each other. And I do think that they do it in a bit of a playful, certainly a creative way. And that is typical of the elegance of Safavid art.